That's the only option I'm given, so that's good. All right, so let's start again. So I'm Rachel Zimmerman, and this grows out of a trauma-informed class that I took, trauma-informed teaching for higher education specifically. As Karen told us a couple weeks ago in a meeting, you know, most of the resources out there are for K-12. And so this was specifically geared for higher ed, which is a little bit different. And as I took the course, which was wonderful, I specifically was taking note on things that I thought were good to share with my colleagues that would benefit all of you, because that is a thing that I very much prioritize here in my work as a faculty fellow and just in general, that I want you all to stop quitting, because I would like you to stay at CSU Pueblo and hang out with me. So here are some things that are specifically geared toward things that will make your life better. Okay. Now I have an outline for today. We're going to start with what are we struggling with, just open-ended, you can dump it in there. I'm going to tell you a little bit about burnout because that often is misunderstood. We're going to talk about scope of practice. This is kind of our big thing today. Trauma-aware teaching practices that benefit you, and referring students to outside support. And I've got people we can refer to, students to. We'll talk about, you know, how do I know whether this is something that needs an immediate phone call versus they can wait, or, you know, that kind of thing. So that is the outline for today. Now, first things first, would you like me to hide participant names both on your end and my end? The default is that you all don't see each other's names when you add things here, but I do. But I can switch that off so that I don't see your names either. Now, you can't confess to crimes because the Nearpod software in the website does record things with your name attached. So this isn't completely private. I could, if I wanted to, go and check who looked at things. But if we want to maybe talk about personal stuff, if you want, I mean, I'm not requiring you to, then you can go ahead and tell me you want names to be hidden. So here's a poll for you to, and tell me whether you want. Okay, and I figure if anybody wants privacy, then everybody gets privacy. So if we have a single vote for please don't show names, then we will not show names. Okay. It looks like, okay. So we will hide names. That's easy. Hide student names and answers. Okay. Awesome. So I can no longer see who is posting anything. All right, so what are we struggling with this semester? So we've got a lot on our plates here. That is for sure. We're having problems with students and faculty not having issue being present. We're having issues with illness. We're having issues with time management, taking on more than we can actually handle. Administrative issues, faculty to faculty issues, being unprepared. Oh, yep. Yes, yes, yes. Right. I mean, we are all empathetic people here, and watching others suffer is hard on us. Right. And that's definitely something that we're going to talk about today. Okay. So it's a lot. And I hope that at least some of these things, the strategies that we're going to talk about today, will help a little bit with, for sure. I hope that's the goal. Okay. So let's talk about burnout. What's really important here to keep in mind is that burnout is a structural issue, not a personal issue. Burnout is the result of having too much demanded of you, of work environments that are not sustainable, of being at an institution where you have like 15 jobs, right? Which is very common in higher education. There's been studies showing that educators, K-12 and higher ed, are the profession with the highest levels of burnout. And so, burnout can look like a lot of things, just exhaustion, hating your job, wanting to quit all the time. Also, it often causes anger and an inability to handle kind of interpersonal stuff. And one thing that often happens with educators is that it presents itself as resentment towards students, which is a particular problem, right? Students are asking us for more and more and more and more, and we're just empty and have nothing left to give. And so it often manifests itself as resentment towards students, which is clearly going to be an issue here. And another issue, it's not that we're just being asked to do more than we can do, it's also that we're doing a lot of work that is pointless. You're wrestling with technology that doesn't work, or you're doing things that are counterproductive, but you're required to do them, these kinds of things, this thankless work. And so there's a lot of layers to burnout, but it's not a personal issue, it is a structural issue. So that is something to be aware of, that if you feel like you're totally burnt out, and it can take years to recover from burnout, that is not a personal failing and not something that you can fix on your own or should have to fix on your own. But that this is, the system that is the issue. Okay. So I want to talk today about the scope of practice, which should be helpful. So in medicine, like you're a dentist or whatever, you have a particular scope of practice where you are allowed to do this procedure, but not allowed to do this procedure. Your job description essentially is very clearly laid out by your qualifications and your licensures. There's you can Google scope of practice of being a dentist in Colorado, and you'll see exactly what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Educators, we have, job descriptions that are this and this and this, and then also everything else. The other field kind of is enormous. So it's hard to know, what are we actually supposed to be doing for our jobs? Where should I say yes? Where should I say no? What am I qualified to do? What have I actually been trained to do? I mean, let's be honest, a lot of us were never actually trained to teach. So a lot of us had to do that on our own. So with medicine and stuff, it's clearly laid out. For educators, it's more nebulous. So we're going to practice making a scope of practice for ourselves, which is really helpful, because then you can say, instead of saying, no, I'm not going to do that, you can say, no, I'm not going to do that. That is outside of my qualifications, outside of my scope of practice. And then you're not the bad guy. Instead, you are just being a responsible employee, right? So for us, it's qualifications, training, our job description, and also healthy boundaries. there are certain things that might fall into the other category, but that aren't really appropriate for us to be doing. And big one here, unless you are a licensed therapist, none of us should be counseling students, right? And a lot of harm can happen when we try to do things that we are not actually qualified to do. One example is that if a student discloses a domestic violence issue or something like that, your first instinct might be you need to get out. But the moment a person leaves a domestic violence situation is the most dangerous. They need to be connected with the correct resources that can make sure that they are safe. So we can often cause very real harm by giving bad advice that seems like good advice to us because we're not qualified. So I have here my scope of practice that I created for myself. And yours is going to probably look a little bit different. Although I think we should all have that first one up there that we are not therapists for our students. But I share this with you to kind of give you some guidance. You know, things that I can do are appropriate for me to do and things that are not appropriate for me to do. And I could expand this list and keep working on it. But I want to direct you to the very bottom one here that I just thought of this morning because I got a request, an email saying, can you please come fly down across the country to us to do a 25-minute talk? And I was like, 25-minute talk to, you know, spend many days traveling. Just no. Is that something that is really, it's something that I want to do? And I lately have been quite more dedicated about thinking about how my actions affect the planet in the future. So there's things that can be more personal on here, that, you know, maybe other colleagues love plane travel and they're all about that, and I'm not. But thinking about what is your job to do and what really isn't can make it very helpful to you to kind of have a more reasonable workload. Um, so I'm going to make it so that you can switch yourself, and I always do a terrible job of this, switch through these 3 slides by yourself so that you can see this, you can see my scope of practice example, and we have a collaborate board where if you want, you can add examples from your scope of practice. But I want you all to take out a Google Doc or a piece of paper or something. And, you know, 2 columns, yes and no, this is what I do, this is what I don't do. I'm not qualified for it, I'm not trained for it, or I just really don't want to. And make yourself a list. Oh, Carol, hello. Here in the chat is a link to Nearpod where you can see what we are doing right now. Everybody is working on writing out their scope of practice as an educator. What are we qualified to do? What are we trained to do? What is our job? What should we really not be doing because we don't know how? And we might cause harm doing things we don't know how to do. It's fun. Hi, Helen. I'm posting in the chat a link to Nearpod so you can see what we're all doing. Right now, we are each coming up with our own scope of practice, a list of things that we are qualified to do, trained to do, that is our part of our job, that is reasonable and responsible for us to do, things that we really aren't qualified to do, that we haven't been trained to do, that if we do them, we might cause harm, or that is just not a reasonable expectation for us to fulfill. Okay. That is our scope of practice. Yes and the no. Okay, yes, that is something that I think, especially in a small institution, happens. In a small institution like ours, we take on 1 million different roles. And therefore, it can be very hard to think of what is not my job. It can be really, really hard. And I wonder if maybe seeing some of these examples gives you things where you can say, no, this is not something that I should be doing. But yes, it's hard. And it takes time. It took me a while to come up with my own scope of practice. So, secondary trauma syndrome, maybe, instead of Superman syndrome, maybe. We're going to talk about secondary trauma syndrome. I don't know what Superman syndrome is. Is that where we think we should do everything? We're the hero? Okay, these are really good. Do we want to continue working on this a little bit more, or do you want to continue on and start talking about some strategies and referral examples outside support? Okay, we made up Superman syndrome. Okay. Any votes? Keep moving on. Okay. Oh, keep moving. Okay. Yes. All right. Wonderful. And this is something you can keep working on your own. And I'm finding it just for myself very helpful already. You know, I started working on this a couple months ago, and I'm finding it very helpful already. So here are some trauma-aware teaching practices that can help you as educators. And I'll discuss each of them. But if you think of something that you do that is a trauma-aware approach that also just makes your life easier and more pleasant, go ahead and add it. So the first one is model healthy boundaries. And this is a trauma-aware approach. So this is a trauma-informed teaching practice that you need to be well in order for your students to be well. Okay. If we take care of ourselves and show that to students, that is good for them. Okay. Educator well-being is good for students. So in one of my classes last semester, one of the feedbacks I got from my students is that the course taught her healthy boundaries about a healthy work environment. Like when she goes and gets a job, she will know what a healthy work environment looks like, which is really cool. So, when I tell my students if I am running really behind on things and, need to get caught up and I'm going to be late with stuff, I tell my students, that I may or may not have COVID. And so I'm going to be resting as much as I can. I tell my students when I do things that are healthy boundaries. And maybe I lie to them a little bit. Maybe I make sure to not answer student emails in the evenings, but I'm doing other work that they don't see. But modeling healthy boundaries is something that is both good for you and for the students. Okay, in class work days, if you see that all your students are behind, you're super overwhelmed with grading, have in class work days. Everybody pulls out their work, they do their work, you sit and do your grading in class, and tell them, if you need help from me, raise your hand, but otherwise I'm going to sit here and do my work just like you're going to sit there and do your work. Realizing that we all just need a little bit more time. That's one way of doing stuff, right? Skip tasks that don't add to learning. I was talking to a student the other day who's running really far behind in one of my classes. One of the assignments I have students do is that they do the readings and then they fill out a Google form that asks them, what did they learn? What do they want to talk about in class? What are they confused about? Really simple, really effective. I love it. But this student hadn't done any of them for the last 10 weeks and was asking, should I go back and do those? And it's like, well, no, because you're not going to learn that from that because you don't remember those readings you read weeks and weeks ago. If you're not learning from it, why waste your time doing it? Let's focus on the actual important work that you're going to learn stuff from. Okay, so if there's, tasks that you do or that your students do that are not adding to learning, maybe we just should ditch them. Have students teach each other. And there's a lot of ways to do this that isn't just peer review. I mean, is that what it's called? Peer feedback. We've talked in a million faculty academy meetings about how to get students to peer review each other's work, and it's so hard. There are other ways of doing it too, that we might be able to kind of brainstorm, but make students do some of the work so that you have to do less. And we know, brain science and all, that when students teach each other, they learn better too. So win-win. Let students participate in designing the course and grading themselves, right? I haven't graded students since 2019, and it makes my life better. Not only because I'm handing off some work to them, but because my work is just much more pleasant when I'm not grading students, when I'm just focusing on how can I help you learn rather than is this an 87 or an 89? Okay. Okay, I don't need details. Secondary trauma syndrome. Okay. This is one of the things I put on my syllabus. Like, if you need time, if you need support, I will believe you. Please, you do not need to give me doctor's notes or obituaries. I do not need details. It is not my job to judge whether you have a valid excuse. And so this is good for the students. It's also good for me because some students will tell me about the horrible things they're going through. But with this policy in place, not all of them will. And therefore, I have the less risk of secondary trauma syndrome, which is something that I'm sure we all deal with, which is where we are hearing constantly about hundreds of people's traumatic experiences, and that causes ourselves to experience trauma. This is a really big problem among educators, but not something that's really talked about much or dealt with much. But it really can affect you if you are, caring about your students and hearing about the horrible things that they're going through, right? And we can't help them with most of those. So having a policy like this in place filters out some of that, not all of it, but a large percentage of it. Okay, I know you're sick, but I don't need to know that you're on the verge of dying, maybe, unless you tell me, right? So I worry a little bit less about you. Okay. Referring to outside support, and this is what the rest of today is going to be about. Um, you know, again, we are not counselors. Go ahead. Yes. What was that?
So I was going to say, if I could interject for a second, I completely agree with what you just said. And I also know that that's part of the opportunity to build relationship with students, right? To be able to say, hey, Lisa, how are you feeling? I know you've been sick. Or, hey, Audra, is your brother out of the ICU?
Mhm.
Is he, how is he doing now after the surgery? I mean, those are also opportunities for us to have that connection and relationship with our students. So I'm curious, maybe we could reflect for a minute on that healthy balance between knowing and relating with our students, but
Right.
not carrying all that trauma, because
Right.
you're absolutely right. I mean, my God, there are things that I want to unhear and I can't.
Yeah.
I've
Well,
just,
teachers,
right.
right.
So being open and receptive, but
Mhm.
not responsible.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, here's the difference. And students know that they can tell me anything. I'm like the warmest, kindest person in the world to my students. They know that they can trust me with anything, but they don't feel obligated to tell me everything. If they don't want to share their specific diagnosis or, the obituary for their family member, they don't have to. This gives them choice to share or not share, and share how much they share. A lot of students will just tell me, I'm really having a hard time with stuff right now. It's personal. That's enough, right? I get a lot of emails like that where students want me to know that they're going through things, but they don't actually want to give me details, especially not in writing. And so it gives them choice. Yeah. Yes. And Alegria, did you want to say something? Because you had your hand up.
I just went ahead and typed it, I think on the age of AI, everything that is out there between certificates and online classes and everything else, all that stuff can be done in isolation in your house, so if nothing else, to save our professions, we need to bring the human into the class, because everything else can be done with AI now. So that was just my point, because the other day a student of mine came at the end of the class and was telling me that he's struggling, and I remember thinking, God, I need to go grade. And then I was so mad because I was thinking, you know what, I need to get AI to grade my stuff, or to not grade, feedback, to do the feedback, like your noun didn't match your verb or whatever, that stuff that is just such a waste of time. And I'm thinking, okay, I need to figure out how to get AI to do that so I can actually spend time with my students after class without thinking I have to grade, because that is the one thing I can do that AI can't. So, it's just very much in my head right now, the whole AI thing.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. And we know that building positive relationships is what makes first generation students, Black students, Indigenous students stay in school. That's where we see those benefits. So, yes, let's build relationships. Let's not require students to disclose their trauma to us.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. No, I mean, that's a really, really good thing to talk about. And there's nuance there. Okay, prepare myself for work through self-care. Yes, definitely. I always like to tell my students the story of my first semester in graduate school, when I was just working. I was like, I do not have time to knit, which is my thing. But it was bad. So the second semester, And from then on, I always made time to knit, even if it was only 10 minutes. And because knitting is a meditative, self-regulating thing, I was able to still get the same amount of work done, actually more work done by taking those breaks to knit. Right? It definitely helps. Okay. So, okay, cool. Now let's talk about referring students. And sometimes it can be hard to know, who do I refer them to? When do I step in and say, you actually need outside support? Because sometimes students will say, I can handle everything. So if you have any questions about, okay, if in this case, what should I do? You can add it here. If you have a story about a successful attempt, a successful referral where you connected them to support services, we can do that. I have one example where I was like, okay, immediately I need to connect this student to people. That is a little bit unusual. And that was that when a student, right in March 2020, a student had gone to another country for a month to visit family and returned back and was like, what is going on? Everything was closed. Stores were closed, dining halls were closed, dorms were closed. And I was like, okay, this student needs help. And so I immediately submitted a PAC Cares referral, because I know the PAC Cares people know where to get food, what is going on with housing. They know all these things that I don't. And so I was able to immediately connect that student with support. Okay. I'm, of course, often telling students in just my weekly reminders to everybody, hey, the counseling center is a thing that exists. And occasionally I will specifically refer a student to a counseling center if they're telling me that they're struggling with personal stuff, with grief or something, right? Also the writing center, right? Not just has to be personal, it could also be academic support. Any other, do we feel comfortable knowing where to send our students to for all of those things on our no column, where this is not my responsibility, this is not within my qualifications? We should be sending students elsewhere. New meditation space, cool, awesome. Yeah, our institution has good counseling type resources. Many institutions don't. So we've got good stuff here. Okay. We're feeling good. Okay, well, so if you have a student who you feel is at an immediate risk, maybe they disclose to you that there's a domestic violence situation or something like that, and you just immediately want to connect them with help, this is who you want to call. And in a case like that, where you're just extremely worried about a student, a phone call is really the way to go, rather than an email or something like that. So Mira is awesome. She works at PAC Cares, but she is specifically the resource and support navigator. And her son and my son are friends. And she is wonderful. And so if I have a student who I'm really concerned about, I'm just going to call her, right? I don't want to have something like that sitting in an email inbox for days. And this not only is good for the student, but it's good for me. If I can get somebody else on the phone and to kind of hold that stress with me, that will make things better for me, right? We shouldn't have to hold these things on our own, right? This care work is the hardest type of work. And if we can do it together with another person who actually knows what they're doing, it's better for us all. Okay. So Mira is the person who I would be calling. I have here links to, you can click on this and it'll open up the website to various other campus life people that might be of help to you. Oh, Spanish speaking counselors. That is a really good question. And I don't know. Now, my next link is to the counseling center, which if you open this up, you'll see on the side, there's a whole bunch of phone numbers, like the rape crisis center and stuff. So this website is a really good one to constantly be giving to students. But that's a good question. I don't know whether we have Spanish speaking counselors. Oops. That is something important that I don't know about. I'm going to write that down. Because yeah, so this is something for us all to know, that there is a large trend in counseling to be really bad and often harmful for students from certain cultural backgrounds, racial backgrounds, neurodivergent students, disabled students. Often counselors are not just not trained to deal with those issues, but poorly trained in racism. And so counseling can actually be quite harmful for some people if you don't have the right counselor who knows what they're doing. So these things are an issue. Yeah. Now, I just want to point out that I modeled some trauma awareness here today. And these are simple things, didn't take any work on my part. Having cameras optional is a trauma-informed teaching practice. Asking you about privacy, making things more private is something. Giving you an outline at the beginning, that can be very helpful for people to know kind of what is going to happen. That is something that I usually don't manage to handle with my classes because I'm throwing things together at the last minute. Sometimes I do, but I'll try eventually to get better at that. Offering multiple ways to engage, speaking, text, just listening, right? And having open-ended questions where people really can share their thoughts. There isn't just one answer. In my classes, I'll get 20 responses to an open-ended question and kind of pick out and highlight some of them so that everybody feels like they get to participate. Okay. Now, my last question in our last minute. What else can I help you with? What do you want to see more of? Some faculty support is what we really need. And so if there is something that you really need, let me know. And either I or somebody else will make it work.
I would appreciate being able to understand more of the needs. Like Alegria just mentioned the Spanish speaking counselors, and I'm on the DEI task force, and we're looking at all aspects of campus services. And I'm in another professional learning thing that's looking at bringing student voices forward. So that little tidbit has just like ignited my brain in one direction, Alegria. So thank you. But hearing more things like that is super important.
Mm-hmm. And I know that our ADHD students need support. There are people whose entire job is ADHD coaching. Wow. I have students who would benefit from that so much. Okay.
So I think neurodivergence is not well understood in general.
Yes.
Yes. And that's neurodivergent faculty and students.
Yes.
And staff, just neurodivergent people.
Wherever, they're everywhere. Yeah. All right, we are out of time. And I'm going to be respectful of your time. And
Denise, can you post the QR code for feedback?
I cannot post a QR code, but I can post a link. I'll just have to go get it.
Oh, that's why I meant the link to it.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you all for coming, and I hope it was helpful.
Thank you, everyone. 1 second, and we'll post a link for feedback if you have a minute longer. It's Friday. I just want to acknowledge it's Friday, and that's awesome.
1 week until Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Even better. There it
people,
is.
While people are getting the link, I just wanted to say that I would love to see something more organized or easy to access for faculty and staff to access help for trauma that they're experiencing. So I would just like it to be a lot easier for someone to get on HR's website and see what's available and how do they access that easily instead of having to like look through the whole thing on their insurance to figure that out, or is there a link just front and center on how you access the EAP, what's available with EAP. Like I just really wish we had a link on HR's website that someone could go to and just see that and see what the resources are easily. Because when people are already struggling and then they're having to try to figure out how to get help, a lot of them just give up. So that would just be something that I would say.
Yes.
Yeah, I put this link that I just shared. I put that in the water cooler for my department so they have access to it. But I agree. Good luck getting HR to post anything on their site. I can't even get them to post the actual jobs that we're hiring for. If you talk about frustrations and things that traumatize you, is just like getting your basic job done sometimes feels like trauma here. So sometimes you just got to go sideways to serve your faculty because you just don't see that they're being served in other ways, and that just adds to your job.
Yeah.
Having to have a whole website for your faculty to find things because they can't find it anywhere on the and keeping up with that website and keeping up all those links becomes part of your job because you care so much that they find things, so if everybody did their jobs, that would be a lot easier.
Or if we had the resources that we needed, like if we had what we needed to provide that appropriate human resource.
Well, indeed, because I think one of the things is like the people in HR, they're so beautiful. I love them so much, and I just think that they just don't have the resources to do what they need, apparently, because there's like basic things that are not done. And then that makes everybody's lives harder as well.
Right.
So I don't know how you solve those things, but we keep trying. My recommendation would be that we have something like this in person because it just feels like you can't really talk in Zoom the same way. It just is not. And I appreciated being in Zoom because I get to be home right now. But I can tell you that when these things are in person, you can really dig a lot deeper than what we're doing here, though. This is an excellent start, to say the least.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for keeping it on the radar, because I think it's here and people are fatigued and people are tired of hearing about it, but it's not going away. We have to continue to bring this. And I just think it's hard when faculty are traumatized and then they're trying to deal with students who are traumatized, or staff that are traumatized are trying to deal with other staff that are traumatized. So it's not gone. We have to continue to work at this. So Karen and Rachel and Denise, I just really, really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, indeed. I want to put a plug in a couple of books I use in the emotional intelligence class. One is Trauma Stewardship. They're ebooks, so I have students access them for free, and you all are welcome to as well through our university library. And the same author had more recently a publication called In the Age of Overwhelm. And it really helps you see all of those layers, not just interpersonally, but globally. And Rachel, I appreciate your mindfulness about those issues. And the more mindful you are, the heavier the load, quite frankly. Ignorance can be bliss sometimes with not thinking about those issues, but we're not good stewards then, are we? So it's a double bind, but understanding, all of the issues of the planet, much less of our nation, much less of our community, much less in our own family, and then inside our own, mind, body, spirit. Those are a lot of things to juggle. And so this book really kind of hits on all of that and trying to find that balance and keeping breathing while facing those issues head on. So thank you, Rachel, for today. We're really grateful to you.
Thank you all. And yes, if you ever want to, send me an email or something, I'm around.
Are you sure that's your job? Just saying.
I'm a faculty fellow. I am a faculty
That's
fellow,
right.
and so that is part of my faculty fellow job description.
Right on.
Oh,
Good
God,
answer.
I love it.
Have a
And
wonderful
Allegria, thank you
weekend,
for
everybody.
that weekly digest that you share out to chairs that we get. That's really helpful.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
and
It gives us
the other thing
reminders.
I want to do a plug. I don't know if you guys have seen on the west side of campus, there's like a square that has a curb around it and has some breeze in it, and that is going to be a labyrinth.
Yes.
And the path is going to be wide enough for a wheelchair. So yes,
Wonderful.
so it's happening.
Yeah, we're hoping we were
Well done.
hoping to get it started this semester, but I guess it cracked or something. But it's so now we got to wait a little longer. But
Cool.
That is really
Yay.
cool. There was
This-
one in downtown Santa Cruz. That was just like a big public one, and people would just walk it and just do like meditative walking. It was so awesome.
but we're gonna do community building like all together. So Carol and I are gonna outline it, and then we're gonna invite people to come and lay rock and you know,
Mhm.
just kind of hang out and do this thing. And yeah, Rachel, that's not my job. It's certainly not on my job description, by the way. Neither is it on Carol's. But here we are doing it, right? But at the
Right.
same time, it's joyful. So does that count as not your job if it's
Well,
joyful?
yes, I mean, if you find it meaningful to you, if it brings you joy, and if you find it meaningful as, you know, because our job descriptions are really vague, right? So if you decide that part of your job is building community,
Mhm.
then that is okay. Because you can then do that instead of the stuff you don't like to do.
Well,
But
count that as it's not in my job description, but what a joyful thing to do. I guess that's my knitting.
Yeah.
That will be my knitting.
Exactly. And we do it in addition to our job description.
Oh, well,
right.
love it.
Well, have a great weekend, everybody.
Have a
Okay,
wonderful
you
weekend.
too.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.